Now I'd like to announce our speaker for tonight. We have Levi Bettwieser. He is a full-time video producer of educational fitness video content for bodybuilding.com. He's a freelance commercial fashion and portrait photographer, and he shoots all of his images on a collection of 15 vintage film cameras that date to the late 1930s. Between the two jobs, he still has time to acquire and process undeveloped rolls of film for the Rescued Film Project, and he has been featured on the Public Radio International and Huffington Post. And so tonight he will discuss the project's origin and its future and address film processing techniques. Now let's give him a big hand.
All right, see if I can make this work. All right, can you hear me? Oh, hey. Hey, thanks for coming out tonight. Yeah, my name's Levi Bettwieser. I'm a native Boisean, and as she mentioned, I work full-time for bodybuilding.com as a video producer, or freelance film photographer, and I'm the founder of the Rescued Film Project. So before I start, I just want to make sure everyone who came in got one of those envelopes. If you didn't grab one, we'll give one to you. Don't open them just yet. Don't get too excited, though. It's not like a magic trick or anything. So to kick things off, I wanted to start by showing a quick 10-minute video. Is this working? Good. A quick 10-minute video that I released about a year ago, so I apologize if some of you have seen it. Once I launched this video, it kind of went viral, went all over the web, and kind of put the Rescued Film Project on the map, and kind of got it to where it is today. So we'll start with that. I perceive all the images that I rescue as being historical. It doesn't matter if the role was shot in the 1990s. I see that as being a piece of history. But this batch of film automatically has the weight of potentially having extreme historical value. Roll 1, roll 6, roll 17, this is roll 23. This one says Lucky Strike Beach, Boston Harbor. Start of train trip, roll of French funeral, 1947. This one was wrapped in some kind of a letter. I've always had a lonesome life, dreaming of success and love. I generally find, you know, a roll here, a roll there. Someone finds a roll on a camera and they sell it or they give it to me or they donate it to the project. So to find a batch of film that's 31 rolls from the same source, the same photographer, that is 70, 80 years old is even more uncommon. All right, so now I have to load the film onto these plastic reels, and then I put them in this light-proof tank, and then I can take that back out into the kitchen and do the developing in straight daylight, and it goes around the reel like this, so that none of the film is touching itself. If the film is touching, then the developer can't get on it, and it won't develop that part of the film, and you'll have that film ruined. So you never want any of the film touching. I've got to shut off the lights and just do this in complete darkness. So. There are a few rolls that have what appear to be water damage. There's some rust on some of the spools, which tells me that it's been exposed to moisture, which is really not good for film, obviously. Film's an extremely organic substance, and it's very sensitive to light and moisture and temperature changes. And you can imagine that since the film is from the 40s, there's no telling how high quality of images are still in the film or if there are any images at all. Some people might look at how I develop film and see that I'm doing it in my kitchen and I'm loading film in my bathroom, and they'll
They think that potentially the quality is lower or the attention to detail is lower as opposed to like a big developing house. And when you are developing film that is so unique as this, where each roll is expired, one might have water damage, you really have to approach it in a small batch approach where you have to treat every roll individually, and you can't think about bulk processing this type of film. So all the film is loaded here in the light-proof tank from the dark room. There you go. So we're going to pre-soak for a minute. I'll pour the water out, I'll pour the developer in, and then we'll develop for 7 minutes. This definitely isn't my first time for the Rescued Film Project developing rolls of film from this age and this era. You generally are exhausting your chemicals a lot faster with old expired film. It's more degraded, more silver washes off, it might have rust in there and other contaminants. Also, another huge hurdle when it comes to developing old film is that it has been rolled up on those rolls tightly for a long, long time. Anything that's been wound up that tight for that long really doesn't want to be unwound. And so I generally can have a really difficult time handling the film, getting it onto the reels, hanging it, scanning it. It's a lot harder to work with than maybe a more modern film. Each batch takes around 30 minutes, and you're literally just sitting there and you're agitating it every 30 seconds. And it can be really tedious and boring. But right around the last 10 minutes of the process, when I'm washing the film, I start thinking, I'm about to open up this tank and see what's on these rolls of film, if there's anything. I get the most nervous while developing the very first batch, because that will be an indicator of the types of images I'm going to get in the rest of the batch. And if I don't get much of anything, then I get really worried. There is a large possibility that I might not recover a single image from any of these rolls of film. All right, so I'm going to pour this out. I'm going to open the top. You can see the film, the reels are in there. And there's one more little step. I'm extremely nervous at that point. And you can't tell if there's images yet because it's so rolled up, and then I pull out the whole batch of reels. And I'll open the reel in a spool. I pop the first one open and then I hold it up, and that's when I kind of take a breath of fresh air, and then I'm just amazed at what I see. What I'm noticing is that most of the images are wide landscape scene shots. The photographer seemed to be really interested in capturing moments that had kind of a large significance to multiple people. Groups of soldiers standing in harbors and waiting for trains and walking out of church. Most old film is not what the old-timers would call a printable negative. They're so degraded generally that it would be a waste of time to take that negative into a darkroom, put it in a larger, and try and print it on a piece of paper. What I love about the technology we have now is I can scan it. Even if I don't see everything that's on that negative, the scanner can then pick up detail in images that I never could see with the naked eye or even with an enlarger. When I tell people kind of what I do and how much time I spend and money I spend on it, they don't quite get it. But then they start looking at some of the images that I found, and they are instantly hooked as well. They can't believe that some of these images have never been seen before. When I pull the film that I just developed out of my film developing tank and look at them, I'm the very first person who has ever seen that picture. They've never been enjoyed. They've never been remembered. And so it almost increases the weight of the importance of that photo because it has never had those moments before. And that's really the goal of the Rescued Film Project. It's really about saving as many images as possible before they're all gone. We really look at every roll of film as if it's the photographer's mark in history, as them kind of saying, hey, I exist, and these moments in time were important to me. And even if the photographer's not around anymore to remember them, we want to reveal the images to the world because the moments in time that were captured on these forgotten rolls of film were important to someone at some point. The goal of the Rescued Film Project is to reconnect the images with either the photographer who shot them or their family, or in this instance, if it's an image of extreme historical significance, find the best avenue or venue possible to showcase and document those images. The reason we call it rescued film is because I believe if we weren't actively searching and finding these rolls of film, that they would be lost forever. There are other projects out there that document historical photos and negatives and slides, but negatives and slides and photos are images that have been processed, they've been hung on people's walls, they've been put in photo albums, and they've been enjoyed by the people who were meant to enjoy them. But with the rescued film, all the images are almost locked away in these rolls of film and have never been seen before. So we feel it's extremely important to rescue these rolls of film, process the images, and enjoy these moments for the people who never were able to enjoy them for themselves.
All right. So, let's see. I just learned PowerPoint yesterday, so let's see. Okay, there we go. So once that video launched, like I said, it kind of went all over the web, and research really started pouring in about where all these photos were taken and everything around them. We were pretty much able to figure out exactly where each one of those photos was taken. Many of them were taken here in the States. In Pennsylvania at a place called Fort Indiantown Gap. They started at Boston Harbor, then there was a boat trip over to Le Havre Harbor in France. There's a Lucky Strike cigarette camp in France, in Reims, a bunch of chateaus, Normandy Beach. But we still have not been able to figure out the photographer or anything about the soldiers in any of the images. So that's kind of where that video led us. And honestly, that video was many people's very first introduction into the Rescue Film Project. And so a lot of people initially thought the project was some kind of military World War II history preservation project. And while that's definitely an aspect of it because of images like this, it's not really the main focus of the project. So I want to define first what the Rescued Film Project is by talking about what it is not. So the Rescued Film Project is not a photo, slide, or negative preservation project. I don't deal at all with pre-processed negatives, printed photos, or anything like that. 100% of the images in the Rescued Film Project come from exposed, undeveloped rolls of film. That is, someone shot the roll, wound it up in a camera, put it in a drawer, forgot about it, thinking they were going to process it later and never did. Maybe they passed away. Or maybe someone shot half a roll in a camera and then put the camera away thinking they were going to shoot more later and didn't. I bought the camera. Or maybe the camera broke halfway through a roll, they disposed of it, and then we got it. So 100% of the images in the archive come from exposed, undeveloped film that has never been seen by anyone before. And to date, I have over 16,000 images in the archive. I don't know how many rolls that is. We get a lot of dud rolls with nothing on them. The images on these rolls of film all come from probably as early as the mid-1930s all the way up until the early 2000s. I process film of all different types and sizes, and if there's a roll of film that I can't process myself because of, an old emulsion type or an odd format, I've got a lot of colleague labs that I partner with, and they can help me process that as well. So, yeah. So the project started about 3 years ago, and it was just out of sheer curiosity. Along with being a film photographer, I process my own film, but I also like to do a lot of thrift store shopping, and I would always go around to the thrift stores, into the camera sections, and I started noticing that a lot of the cameras still had rolls of film left in them. And so I just started buying them, $3, $4, $5 a pop, just mainly the little compact 35 millimeters and like this Advantix films, and like 110. And it took me about 6 months, but I got enough rolls, which was 30 to 40 rolls, for me to justify the chemicals. And I took a whole day, and I processed all of them, and I was just astounded at how many images I was able to get off of those. I figured that most of them were degraded, old, the backs of the cameras had been opened, but just out of all the thrift stores like here in the Boise area, I was able to get several hundred images just in that very first batch. And there was nothing astounding. It was just, birthday parties, vacations, and it was all modern film in modern times. But it really showed me that if I can get that many images just here in the local Boise area, how many rolls of film are left around the world that have been forgotten about, lost, put away in a trunk. A lot of people put them away assuming that they could never get them processed. And so that's when the Rescued Film Project kind of took shape. I made it public. I started looking around the world, reaching out to people. And it's really taken off since then. So, I thought it would be fun, since the underlying goal of the Rescued Film Project is to reconnect the images with the people that are either in them or who shot them. And since that first batch was from here in Idaho, I thought it'd be fun to look at some of the images from that first batch in Idaho and see if anyone in here recognizes anyone up there. So these are all pretty basic photos. I mean, they're not, like I said, it's nothing astounding. It's mainly just people and families. If you recognize someone, just raise your hand, let me know, because that would be pretty awesome, actually. Well, that's a picture of a camera with a roll of film that I got out of it. I forgot to pull up, so. All right, so this is the first one. This is a medium format image I got on a roll of black and white at a flea market. And it's kind of old, so I'm assuming no one recognizes. Anyone? No? Cool. Couple putting together a puzzle in their living room with some sweet wood paneling. Yeah? Nope? All right. I know where this is. This one is actually kind of fun. This is Ponderosa State Park up in McCall, if anyone recognizes this area. And it's funny because I processed this roll the week after I was just there doing some hiking, so it was kind of weird. And this was from the very first batch, so. No one? No one? Okay. Marshmallows. Most of these images on this roll look more like Red Rock area, so. Zim's Hot Springs, I know that because there's a sign. These ones, all the images off this roll, obviously, they came from a waterproof camera, and these are still some of my favorite images to date because it's this boy and another one just taking turns taking pictures of each other underwater, and they're pretty fun. But, okay. Just having dinner at Smoky Mountain Pizza. You can tell by the menu. Baby shower. So yeah, once again, these all came from local Boise, Idaho thrift stores or antique shops. We just got a couple more. This one's pretty awesome. Some of my favorites as well. I've got another one from this roll I'm going to show later. No? All right. All right, one more. If you guys want me to hold on one a little longer, let me know. And this is the last one. Okay, well, so whenever I start telling people about the project, inevitably there's always like 4 to 6 of the very common questions that come up every time. And so I figured I'd just address some of those now so that the question time later might be a little shorter. And so the first question I always get, and I've already kind of answered it, is where does all this film come from? People don't believe or are just shocked that there's so many rolls of film out there. And the majority of it is purchased directly by myself from some kind of source. Like I've already mentioned, thrift stores, antique shops. But I've also been able to establish relationships with a lot of camera dealers and resellers, which is a lot of where these come from. They'll buy a camera to resell it, clean it up, find a roll in it. I buy directly from them. Also a lot of online auctions and stuff like that. But also, since the project's taken off, we accept donations of film. So as people know more about the film or about the project, they can donate it to me for free processing. And so I've to date had about 170 donations of film, and that's not just like a donation of one roll. Some of those rolls, including this one, have been up to 140 rolls just in one donation, which has been pretty incredible. And this batch right here, once again, was 140 rolls of all different types, and it was donated by the son of the man who shot it, who's now passed away. But a lot of it documents his time in World War II in Korea, and I'm still processing a lot of these rolls, and there's some pretty incredible images in here. But he told me like it was stored in a garage in like the hottest environment you can imagine, so I'm getting really varied results, but it's still pretty amazing. The next question, and once again, I feel like I already kind of answered this one too, is what's the oldest roll, or what's the oldest image you've ever gotten? And probably the late 1930s, and that's really because of the availability of roll film. Since roll film was invented before consumer photography became a thing and film became roll, and it rolled and accessible, it was in sheets and plates and things like that. And so that does not hold up as well to time. So pretty much since roll film has been around is about as old as we've been able to rescue. So. And obviously the big question is, has anyone ever recognized themselves in any one of your photos? And the answer is yes, once. We posted about 3 months after we started our Instagram account, we posted an image, this image, of a man holding a dog. And someone recognized this as their father. And it was quite shocking because I had just barely made the project public. We just started the Instagram, and someone immediately recognized someone. I was like, oh man, this is going to be easy. I'm going to reconnect all these images with all these people. It's only been 2 months or whatever. But this is her. Her name's Bree. She's the one the girl. And I sent her all the images from the roll, and it turned out that she was on the majority of the images. And she told me the story about what it was. Parents had just bought her that dog. And so it was a little family gathering to, celebrate the new dog. So this was a roll that we got in a camera here in Boise, actually. She lives in Portland, and she was excited. So that was kind of, you never know what people are going to think. So I've yet to reconnect any more orphaned images being from random rolls I got from random places. But it is kind of a reconnection when someone donates a roll from like a deceased family member. Like several months ago, I processed a bunch of film that a man had donated from his deceased mother. And he was 60-something, or is 60-something at the time, and there ended up being photos of him when he was a baby and a toddler, and some in his teenage years and that. And so it was really fun. I actually got on the phone with him, and he just went through each photo, and he was like, oh, that was my best friend growing up. Oh, that was my first car. Oh, that was my sister. And so it was really pretty incredible. So in a way, that is a reconnection of a lost, orphaned image. So the other more common question I get is, do I ever get anything that would be considered illegal or obscene? And the answer is sometimes, but very, very, very infrequently. So if I had to give the project like a movie rating, I would say probably about 95% of the images in the archive would get like a G or PG rating. Maybe 4.75% would be PG-13, and maybe only 0.25% would be an R rating or above. So I think back when we actually had to shoot film, there was a lot less anonymity, and so people knew that someone was going to be looking at these images unless they could process their own film. So yeah, it's all very kind of innocent, basic, moments in life. All right, so with that being said, let's look at some kind of fun images. So like I said, the archive has over 16,000 images so far, so it's really hard for me to kind of go through and select which ones to show. So I figured I'd show a couple that were had a little bit more notoriety to them, and some that are just a little bit more random. So probably about 20 or so images that we'll go through, and I'll start with black and white, and then we'll do some color. So the first black and white ones I want to show are ones I processed probably about 6 months ago, and I didn't realize what I had until I kind of scanned them in. I got about 9 images of President Eisenhower, and like I said, when I saw the negative, you just see a guy, but then I scanned them in, and I was like, he looks really familiar, and then I was like, I know it's someone, and I figured it out, and I actually got contacted 2 weeks ago. His youngest granddaughter, Mary Jane, emailed me 2 weeks ago, because I'd reached out to whoever I could to try and find out, and no one got back to me, but finally she did. So she was kind of telling me about him. She's like, oh, this could be when we used to go to the coast, or we used to go to Disneyland. I should send her all the images. And then I also got contacted at the almost exact same time by the Eisenhower Library. So we're going to research these images and figure out when they were taken, why they were taken, and what was going on. So yeah, they're pretty incredible. Next is, this one and the one right after it were from my very first batch of black and white processing. This is from a roll of 35 I got out of California. And I didn't know it at the time, just looked like a kind of a cool guy, but this is actor Pat O'Brien, and this is behind the scenes of his movie Flowing Gold. I don't know if it's some kind of press event, but he's signing autographs, and so that was pretty fun. I'd been looking at this image for probably a year, and I had no idea, and then I put it out on the web, and someone's like, oh, yeah, that's that person. And so I've really found that the crowdsourcing and putting the images out there is the best way to research these images. So this is an unknown sculptor I got off a roll of medium format in California. There's also another image of like massive busts of Abraham Lincoln that apparently he'd worked on, and someone has suggested that this is a famous blind sculptor. I forgot his name, but I haven't had the time to research it. And this is from a very interesting batch. You're like, why are you showing me this? So I got 10 rolls of 35 millimeter black and white out of New York, and about half of them ended up being kind of semi-voyeuristic images of women on a stoop, what appears to be out of a window. So it's all pretty innocent, but it's obviously got a kind of creepy tone to it. But they, in a sense, I mean, they're kind of interesting, because you sit there and you're thinking, well, is this person, you don't know. Is this person just kind of a creep? Is this some kind of staged art photography? Is this someone doing press? Is this a private investigator? So you don't really know what's going on, but like this image right here was one of an entire roll of 36 images that he just shot continuously of this woman on this stoop. So very interesting. But on the flip side of that, he was actually a very, very talented photographer, and the other half of the images from these rolls were very beautiful landscapes, including this one, which is the New York skyline in front of a fireworks show, obviously with the World Trade Center. So there's also some beautiful pictures of Yosemite. This is a alley brawl between a couple kids, and I have a whole roll of pictures just of this, and it's fun to see the progression of it. And if you look at them, the kids are obviously kids, but they're also poor because they're kids, and they only have one set of boxing gloves. So they each only have one, so one's got one on his right hand, one's got one on his left, and it's just fun to see the horror of the kids in the background being like, okay, yeah. So those are some of my favorites. There's also ones like this, which is a Nazi soldier. This comes from that batch I mentioned that was donated from 144 rolls, where his father was in Korea and World War II. So this one is actually probably one of my absolute favorites so far. You can see it's a gentleman sitting in the side of his car, exhaling smoke as he's smoking a cigarette, and his car is just trash. He's parked over a curb. And you can see his car has like a roll cage in it, and there's a man sitting in the back. And I'm assuming this is some kind of like drag race or some kind of street car race that went bad. But the same photographer they shot a ton. I have like 2 rolls of just accidents like this, including this one, which, you know, you can never really understand what's going on. It looks staged, honestly, but you can never really assume what's going on. It could be an ambulance, it could be a hearse. And this one's definitely a little bit more haunting for me because no one is facing the camera, except for someone way in the back. So once again, you can really tell when you get obviously more of a professional photographer over more of an amateur photographer. And then there's fun ones like this, like a fairy gorilla confronting a guy in a Maryland Mansion shirt. So yeah. This came from that batch I also mentioned earlier of the man who I spoke with on the phone, where he got an image of him as a toddler. He is the blonde one on the right. That's him with his older brother, obviously in the military. And I have a little bit of context behind this one because this also comes from a donated roll. This is aboard a ship going for an Arctic voyage, as much as I know right now. Obviously, that's a biplane on kind of on the ship. So I've got a couple more from this. I've got actually more rolls from this batch I need to process that I haven't been able to. But it's just astounding to see. I mean, this kind of stuff, it blows my mind. This one's fun. It's kind of a marketing photo, I imagine, from a landscape company. And I actually went on their website because their name is on that. They're still in business. I emailed them, but they haven't gotten back to me. But there are other photos from this exact same shoot on the homepage of their website right now as like their marketing photos, which is really kind of interesting. So I don't know why these ones didn't get processed, but, and, target practice in the backyard. And this is the last black and white one. I just really love the images just because of the way the mountains look in the background. It was from a roll of 35 millimeter out of Montana. All right, let's do color. So this was from that very first batch. You saw the other image of the kind of the 80s prom girl before. This is another image from that roll, the silhouette against the sunset, and you just love the 80s bangs. And so obviously this one looks like it's mid to late 70s, maybe early 80s. And I don't like this image particularly, but the series of images on this roll is really interesting, especially because when you see that this volleyball game went a little wrong and someone misstepped. So that's fun. It's fun when you get to see multiple images from the same photographer. A lot of times I will just get one image on one roll. So it's fun when we get to paint a little bit bigger of a picture. Got some sweet 80s fashion, bringing back the jumpsuits. This was from an early batch as well. This is a Ringling Brothers Circus parade through the middle of a town, and I just love the way the cops just keeping an eye on things. This is out of Colorado from a roll of medium format color, and I don't know, the overalls, and I think I used to have that exact same water pouch. At least my dad did. This was shot on obviously what's called like a 3D camera, like a Nishika. It takes 4 images at once and you can kind of combine them. It was this kind of gimmicky thing, but I thought it was pretty fun. Studs sitting on the back of the boat, having a beer, a headband on. This is obviously another amazing image that I love, and there's been some debate on how this one was shot. Some say sound trigger, some say it was used during a long exposure, but either way, the negative on this one was actually really, really thin, so I was actually pretty happy that I was able to pull this good of an image out of it. And then there's this, which I don't know what's going on here. So we'll just pass that one up. Okay, so who here has processed film? Yeah. Okay, I'll try not to get too in depth. You might find holes. So, as most of you apparently know, film is a very sensitive material to work with. It is very, very sensitive to light and moisture and temperature changes. And, a lot of people didn't think, and honestly I wasn't sure either, that you could process film that is 70 years old, 60 years old, and still get a printable negative. But a lot of the rolls do see the test of time. And so I'll post an image that I've processed that maybe be a bit more degraded because of what's happened to it over the years. And people will reach out and be like, offer their photo processing services to me or their photo restoring services and say, you know what, I can take care of that photo for you. I can clean it up. I can make it look as good as new. And I always cordially decline because what that final image looks like, because of what it's gone through, to me is as important to the final image as the actual image that was taken. And so the fact that that image went through 70 years of whatever, of drawer to trunk, back to drawer to glove box, and maybe got wet and maybe was in a hot garage, that all now has created the final image, and I don't ever mess with any of those images. I like them just the way they are. I think it tells a better story, and there are people these days who are actually degrading their film on purpose just for these types of effects. They'll soak it in water and Coca-Cola and do all sorts of things to get these crazy effects. And the way that these images look when they come out to me is it's more art than photo at that point. So I kind of want to show you some of the different types of degradations I see as I process film, some of the more common ones, and then explain to you why I kind of enjoy them. So the first one, you can see on this image here, the right side obviously looks fine, but the left side is all white and bright. And what that is the emulsion. The emulsion is still on the film. And what emulsion is that's where the actual silver and all the things that make the chemical make the picture happen are on the plastic. And in order, when you develop film, basically your developer reacts with the emulsion that is touch light, and it washes away the emulsion that didn't touch light, so that's where you get light and dark on the negative. And the reason that the emulsion is still on here is because it did not touch the chemicals. And the reason it didn't touch the chemicals is because the paper backing was stuck to it, because it got a little moist or something happened. You can imagine over 60 years, a roll of film is wound up very tightly, it gets a little humidity in there, and then the emulsion sticks to the paper. And this actually happens quite frequently, and I'm able to pull it off and still make it work pretty well, but in this instance it wasn't able to, so yeah. Another thing that happens very common, mainly with color film obviously, is color shifting. You can notice on this image it's more reddish in the middle, kind of green and blue on the sides. That's because color film does not hold up nearly as well as black and white film. I actually get much better images of black and white film from the 50s than I do from color film from the 80s and 90s, just because old color film is very high quality, had a lot of silver in it. Old black and white film. Color film is primarily dyes with just a light kind of black and white silver base. What also is wrong with this image, and is very common, is light leaks. You can tell from the sides the light is coming in. And same thing as rolls go through time, instead of, they might loosen a little bit and light gets through. If you look at a 35 millimeter canister, it's sealed all the way around. But when it's rolled on a paper backing, light can get in from the sides and even through the paper itself. So here's another example, which you've seen earlier, of the light leaked image. Another thing is mold. So as I mentioned, moisture really affects these images. And a lot of times, if something gets wet enough, it'll just completely rot the emulsion and it'll wash completely off in the development process, and I'll get a completely blank negative. But other times, if it's not completely drenched, it will create mold and it will grow on the film, which actually is kind of what I was talking about, is a really cool effect that people are actually doing now. Here's another one. So you can tell that there obviously is an image in there. There's a woman in the middle, but this organic material grew on the film, and that's really kind of what I'm talking about when it comes to, it's more art now. So, and the most common thing I get is just thin negatives, and thin negatives just means that after time the emulsion is less sensitive, and more of it washes away than it should if it was new film, and so the negatives turn out really thin, which means there's not a lot of material to work with. And then I get images like this, and this, I almost threw this negative away because I did not see almost anything on the negative. It was just kind of a texture, but I decided to scan it in, and that's the amazing part about the technology we have now, is you could never take this to a darkroom and print it, or you could, but you wouldn't really get anything. But I could take the scanners and really pull out that detail, and you can kind of see what's going on here. And honestly, most people when they see this don't realize it's a picture. They think it's a drawing. And you can see it looks to me to be a father standing with his daughter fishing in front of a lake. And you can even see that the mold has kind of taken over this image as well. So we got a lot of thin negatives. And so as the project grows, I'm noticing more and more themes that we take, the types of pictures we take as people. And so I just kind of wanted to run through some of those themes and show you some fun images, and then we'll open those mystery envelopes. So, Christmas. Christmas is a very common theme. Christmas morning especially. Kids opening up packages and presents and looking either disappointed or happy, and you can always tell the difference. Another very common one, and as I go through these, you might notice that most of these are tied in with children, and that's also another common theme overall is birthdays. Lots of birthdays, first birthdays, second birthdays, 90th birthdays, and more so than just birthdays is birthday cakes. I might have more pictures of just cakes by themselves than with people in them. So either someone's really proud of their cake work, or I don't know. But yeah. And of course, Halloween. I've got Halloween pictures from the 30s all the way up until now. Everyone loves a good Halloween image. This is actually the little cow with the massive skeleton balloon. And then, of course, cats. Lots of cats. Lots and lots of cats. And cats. And then, of course, I actually have more of these dogs. I rescued this one from Idaho, so if anyone recognizes this dog. Lots of dogs. Yeah. And then the last most common theme, just vacations. All sorts of places. Exotic, cold, awkward. Yeah. All right. So the time has come. Everyone have those envelopes? If you don't have one, right up the front and grab one. But go ahead and open them. And don't get too excited. Like I said, it's not a magic trick. Everyone has a completely different image. No two images in here are the same. And so I specifically picked these images for a couple of reasons. The first one is that I primarily tried to pick photos that are pretty traditional photos of people smiling at the camera and posing, because that is a very common theme. But then also I picked images that no one else has ever seen before. So besides myself, you now are the only ones who have ever seen that picture you're looking at right now. I've never released any of these to the public, maybe with a few, because there might have been a few that slipped through the cracks. So, and I'm sure some of you are kind of thinking, you know, like, so what? You know, this is kind of a crappy photo of someone I don't know. But just try and kind of enter my mind for a second and just kind of stare at the photos for a second, and then realize that that is a real person. They're kind of removed, but that is a real person. They exist or they existed. And then kind of think, and every time I process a roll of film and I see that I got images, the first question that always pops in my mind is, why wasn't this processed? What happened to the person that made it so that they don't get to see this image anymore? So look at the image and try and tell their story. How old are they? Are they still alive? Where are they? What's going on? Are they happy? Are they rich? And those are all the things I go through every time I see an image, is what's going on with this person? Where are they now? Why didn't they process this photo? And to me, images are more than, they're more than just pictures. Images are what we use, and they're our only defense against time. They're the only thing we have, besides, I guess, like video now, to say, I was here, I existed, I mattered to someone, I was loved, and I contributed to my community. And so the people in those images right now, maybe one day we'll get to see them, but if not, then at least we know that they were here, they existed, and people loved them. So I'm going to continue the Rescued Film Project until all the film is gone, until I've done everything I can to rescue all of them. And I just ask everybody to help me. Keep your eyes open for rolls of film that you know need rescuing, and donate them to the project. And that's it. Does anybody recognize anybody in your photos? No? Does anybody have any questions?
What are you doing with the images? Are you creating your own archive? Are you donating them to a university? Do you sell them?
I'll go in reverse order. Yeah, I sell prints on just a request basis, just to try and fund the project. Everything in the project is personally funded by myself right now. It's not to generate any real kind of income, and those are few and far between. I maybe do one a month by request. Yes, I do want to create an archive for myself. I do work with other, like the Eisenhower Library, to maybe include the images in their library when those situations arise. I did send all the World War II images to a historical archive for like the Fort Indiantown Gap, which I mentioned earlier, for their purposes, but I want the Rescued Film Archive to be its own entity eventually. I want it to live as an online resource like a Wikipedia, so that people can go on, search for images, and lend their own research, because as I mentioned, to me, that is the best way to figure out where these images are taken and who these people are. I mean, you can spend all day with one person researching, but they're not going to be nearly as good as the collective mind. So, and that's what I've noticed, is when I post one image, people research it, and the resources, like I posted an image last week that was of three soldiers walking down what looked like war-torn Europe. Within 45 minutes, I figured out it was Frankfurt, Germany, and did a Google Street View side-by-side of what it looks like now, and it was pretty incredible. So, yeah, I do eventually. The website is not very functional right now. If you go to it, I apologize. But eventually, yeah, I want it to live at least online and then have a physical archive as well.
How are you funding this? Are you doing it yourself, or have you found some grants?
Yeah, well, I did get one grant, but we're going to use that for our first gallery showing, which is going to be June, first Thursday down at Trailhead. We just found out today, so we'll be doing that. It initially was 100% funded by myself, yep. But since the project kind of took off, I started getting small donations, $5, $10 at a time, and that's really helped kind of sustain things, because it does get more and more expensive. Honestly, the most expensive part of the project is just buying the film. And so as many people as I have relationships with, there are other people who just look to purely profit off it, which I understand. So yeah, that's definitely the most expensive part. That's where like 95% of our funds go.
Can Kodachrome be rescued?
It can, not by me. Yeah, Kodachrome, I don't have the setup for it. But yeah, it has to be cross-processed. It's black and white, and then it has to have the REM jet removed in another process. But yeah, I partner with a lab in Seattle called Blue Moon Camera, Seattle, Portland. And if you have Kodachrome, you can send it to them, and it's like $18 a roll, which is expensive, but it's the cheapest one out there. Everyone else out there is like $45 a roll. But yeah, it can be cross-processed as black and white, and I've gotten mixed results. Some come out extremely dense, but some come out amazing, but they have to be black and white. For context, Kodachrome is an old film that was very famous, has amazing colors, but was deemed kind of bad for the environment, so is now illegal. And there's a lot of Kodachrome out there, so yeah.
So I found you on Instagram, and I follow you there, and I love your posts. I think my favorite was the fabulous man in the black dress and the yellow wig.
Yeah, this is Eric Bauer right here. He's my friend and colleague. He runs our Instagram account. So when you talk to him. Anyway.
Cool. So what I was wondering, though, and this actually sparked before tonight, was, gosh, these guys should be on Facebook, because I could see that going way viral. Do you have a presence there where?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, our Facebook page, we have nearly 16,000 likes and growing. So yeah, so the Instagram is amazing. It's got amazing photos. It's amazing entertainment, and that's what we go for, just sheer entertainment. Facebook's a little bit more behind the scenes and things like that. We do post photos. I try to post photos almost daily from the archive, and then we also have a Tumblr, which is kind of a really fun area to post images as well. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions we can answer?
If someone wanted to help fund, where would they go?
There's a contribute section on our website. It's rescuedfilm.com, and it's just top right, contribute, and that's where you learn about how to contribute film, but then there's also a couple of donate buttons right there. So yeah.
You're doing a exhibit of some of your photos. Do you have any plans further, like a book or, I mean, what's
Yeah.
in the future?
Yeah, well, I'll kind of explain my mindset and where I am right now with the project first. And really, like I mentioned, in the 3 years I've really been pursuing this hard, the availability of film is already noticeably less. There's a lot less film out there, so I'm noticing that it's going away quickly. And so right now I'm only really concentrating on getting as much film as possible and processing it. I'm not really concentrating, honestly, that much on the promotion of the project or like the next steps, because the processing and the scanning and all that takes so much of my time. But yeah, I mean, it's been mentioned, books. I had someone try and buy the rights to the World War II images for a book. I want to do a couple little like T-shirts and hats and stuff showcasing the images. But yeah, I haven't really put any solid plan into place. I'd like to do a traveling gallery. I've been approached by a couple people around the country to do galleries, but I don't really know the next steps. I'm just concentrating on rescuing the images right now. But if someone wants to volunteer their time, they can contact me. Sure? Yeah.
I'm just curious, what is your call to action for us? How can we help if we want to get involved?
Yeah. The question was, how can you help? What's the call to action? And really, the biggest thing, honestly, is to spread the word and to keep your eyes open for roles of film to rescue, because that's the biggest thing. The more people who are aware of it and know that this resource is here, the more roles we're going to be able to rescue. And that's the one thing when people find out about the project, email, they're like, I had no idea that you were here. A lot of people don't have resources to get film processed anymore, or it's an odd size of film, so they don't know where to get it processed. And that's honestly the biggest thing to do right now, and spread the word. There, I got one. You just wanna...
So you're a photographer and a videographer, but relative to photography, how has your involvement in this project impacted your sensibilities and your aesthetic as a photographer?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I've pretty much stopped doing side photography just to work on the Rescued Film Project, but more so than it's shaping my own, how I shoot, because I'm more of a commercial photographer. It's more, not as much art photography, but it's shaped the way that I view why and how people take photos now. When people had to shoot film, they shot for a very specific purpose, and usually that purpose was just for the sole remembrance of that moment and to share it with others that they were close to later. I don't feel like that happens as much anymore. I feel like images are more shot for promotion and for other people to see them. When you shot on film and you printed images, the only people who would ever see those pictures were people that you were close to, your friends and your family members. But now it seems like everything is just so mass distributed. People have a different kind of agenda in mind, and they self-edit, and they take 50 photos and post the best one. But the images back when we shot film and in the Rescued, in the archive, I think are very honest expressions of that exact moment. I don't think we get that as much anymore. So, but as photographers, we kind of have to manufacture moments so it kind of fits within the spectrum, right? So you have to create a certain composition in the image and the subject. So I honestly don't think it has impacted my professional photography as much, but I never take pictures of like anything in my personal life and put it anywhere. It's just never, it wasn't really something I did before, and it really isn't something I especially do now. So, yeah.
Okay, any last questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for coming tonight, and let's give Levi another round of applause.
Thanks, everybody.